James, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. This is the work session part of our agenda, and it really belongs to our college attorney, James Minato. So let's just hand it over to James and maybe give us a little background of how we got here, perhaps.
Thank you. Yes. Well, anyway, let me just start by saying thank you for having me to present this today, and Board President Kasuga and board members and President Elliott and staff. I'm happy to do it. And this was requested to us, requested by the Attorney General's office, actually, that we have some educational presentations because a couple of years, it's probably been, I don't know, a couple of years back or maybe a year and a half, we had a problem with an executive session that ended up resulting in an open meeting law violation, and they looked at that, and one of the things that they recommended was that we would do some presentations, or at least a presentation, to the board and staff, just to act as a refresher, and because I know everyone gets trained in this when they first come on board and everything, but time goes by and sometimes we forget things or who knows what. But so that's really the basic reason behind it. But anytime the board feels like they would like to have a presentation and get into even greater detail, just all you have to do is ask, right? So basically, we were going to do this at the board retreat, but that got canceled. One of the reasons why was because I got really sick, and then other things happened. So here we are today. So this isn't actually a board retreat, of course, but. So the Arizona open meeting law it's actually a large body of law, and it's a little more than you can do in an hour. And so what I decided to do today was to talk mainly about the executive session part of what the board does and the Arizona open meeting law as it applies to executive session. So as it says there, everything that the board does in the way of legal action has to take place in a public meeting. But recognizing that there are occasions and there are subject matters that where the public body, the Pinal County Community College District or Central Arizona College will be better served by discussing some things confidentially. And this is known as an executive session, and the law does allow for that within certain very structured guidelines. So just a little overview. We've had this law on the books since 1962, actually predating that of the federal government. It is nationwide at this point, so every state in the union and probably the territories also have some form of an open meeting law, and it's really, it's for the protection of the public and for the edification of the public. In other words, the legislative bodies have recognized that government is better. The public is better served when government operates openly, and this law that we're going to talk about today is designed to ensure that kind of openness. And that's really the basic intent behind all of this, is that government does not operate in a way which is concealed from the public. And as we get into talking about executive sessions, you'll see that there is a tension between this intent and what we are able to do in executive sessions. In other words, the overarching intent of this law is to ensure that the public always sees and hears the operation of the government, but there is executive sessions, and so there is that legal tension, you might say. But this, the open meeting law has been construed by the courts of Arizona very consistently. And they've always, when they make a ruling, it's almost always in favor of the public and against the public body. In other words, they will always construe the open meeting law in a way which is favorable to the constituencies that we work for. So a few little basic requirements. This is not just for executive sessions. As you know, we have to give the public at least 24 hours notice. Because we do our meetings on Tuesday, that would mean that sometime on Monday morning would be the last opportunity to make modifications or changes to the agenda and get it posted within this 24-hour window. But as a general rule, Mary Lou and I will get the agenda prepared on Wednesday or Thursday, and she will usually have it posted no later than Friday, I believe. Is that right, Mary Lou? Yes. Yeah, so we try to get it into the public's hands on Friday, which is well in advance of what's required by the law. The exceptions are listed there. If there is an actual emergency occurring in the district, you can do it in less than 24 hours, but that's very tricky ground, and the declaration of the emergency has to be super legitimate. It's got to be something that can withstand scrutiny in case there's a complaint about it. Ratification doesn't come up very often, but if you're going to ratify something that was done at a prior meeting, which is not a process that we're going to get into today, but if you wanted to ratify prior action, you got to have 3 days notice. And if the meeting gets recessed for anything, but that recess is less than 24 hours, then that's another exception to the 24 hours, and that doesn't happen very often either. A few more basic requirements. The agendas. Notice to the public, we always have to have an agenda, right? We know that. It's pretty basic. But the second paragraph is the more important part. Agenda items have to be described specifically enough to allow the people reading that agenda to really have a clear understanding of what we're going to be talking about and doing at the meeting. And so when the board convenes in a public meeting with the intent of taking legal action on the things that we've put on the agenda, the caveat, it's got to be properly listed. And this is sometimes a spot where difficulty takes place. In other words, the wording of the items on the agenda has to be very specific to the action that you're going to take. Sometimes it isn't, but that's part of my job and Mary Lou's job. We work together to take what's been put on the agenda and make sure it's worded properly and fits within the law. Mind you, and so you shouldn't worry about this too much, because basically I'm always there to review the agenda, make sure it's been drafted properly, and all of that. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing to know. If someone on the board proposes that an item or some type of thing be put on the agenda, we'll take it, in its general form, let's say, and figure out how to properly, phrase that as an action item on the agenda. So that's basically one of my jobs for the college and the district, is to make sure those things happen. And Mary Lou and I always work together on that to make sure that's the case. So here's an example of things that don't make it. Statutory references. You see this often with public bodies. And so this is one. This is would not be appropriate. This would not pass muster if you put on an agenda. Number 5, an executive session. The governing board may choose to enter in an executive session pursuant to ARS 38-432-03A1. That's a recitation of the statute. See, it doesn't provide enough information about what you're actually going to be doing. And this is where I harken back to what I said about a tension between the privacy that the board can utilize, or the confidentiality of going into an executive session, yet putting enough information on there so that the public at least has a general idea, right? In other words, this does not cut it. This would get us in trouble. So we don't do it like this. We have to have enough information on there without giving away all the confidentiality. See, and that's the tricky part. So that's why whenever we go, whenever Jackie or whoever tells me that we need an executive session, then I have to sit down, put my thinking cap on, figure out how am I going to write this so that the public's getting what it needs under the law, but I'm not destroying the confidentiality of the executive session. So that's basically what's going on when we create these agendas, especially if there's going to be an executive session. Here's another bad example. A possible action item related to executive session, insufficient. This was one from one of our own agendas, so, you know, I'll say mea culpa, I guess, or whatever, but, so just a couple of, there's a lot of ways to be insufficient in this, right? You know, the examples are innumerable, but this is what we're always striving to do when we create an agenda for the public, is to, especially if it's an e-session, give them enough information where it fits under the requirements of the law without destroying the confidentiality purposes of the executive session. So I said BTW, what's legal action? That's the statutory definition of legal action. As you can see, it's quite broad, right? All discussions, deliberations, considerations, consultations, right? I mean, that's a very broad description of things that constitute legal action. The kicker is, though, it's got to be among a majority, a quorum. So we have a quorum of 3 on our board, right? Because we have a body of 5. If it's only 2 people, maybe they can talk. I don't always recommend it that you do that, but you know, if it's only 2 people, it's probably going to be okay if we're challenged, because it's not a quorum. It can never be legal action until you have a quorum, at least 3 people, right? The other caveat, see that word I underlined, foreseeably? That's the tricky part, right? So the board, 3 members of the board, for whatever reason, decide they're going to discuss something. You're on thin ice already, right? But what did they talk about when push comes to shove? Were they talking about something that may foreseeably require a final action by them? But we never want to even get to that point. You know, whenever we have a quorum gathering, it's best to either put out an agenda, even if they're at a baseball game. You know, if we're going to have a quorum present anywhere, it's always better to put out an agenda for the public to avoid getting into a situation where somebody says we violated this. But it's so as you can see, there's a couple of different parts to this when you talk about legal action. So the whole point of this is that taking legal action without having agenda as the matter for the public will get you a complaint, and you'll be dealing with the Attorney General's omelet team, as they're referred to, open meeting law enforcement teams, just a bunch of assistant attorney generals that come down on us or other public bodies when they believe we've made a mistake. Yes.
So if you have 2 people that are trying to clarify something about what's going on that we want to discuss later in the board meeting, then we should not have that discussion.
I believe, as I say, if you look at the law, it says legal action is something that can only be done by a quorum, and if you have 2, there's no possibility of it, and so theoretically, under the law, that would not be something you could complain about. Right. I don't recommend it though, because you're kind of walking out there on the ice, you know.
So if I ask this fellow right here next to me a question, and he gives me his opinion, and I compare it with mine, and we come to a conclusion about what we can do,
right,
that's okay. But if he turns around and goes to her and asks her the same question, then that's a traveling board.
Well, and we're going to get to that a couple of slides in, but yes, you are correct, Jerry. It's called splintering the quorum. It's also something that is not, I would say, in the history of Arizona and all of its cities and towns and public bodies. It's something that's happened before. It can be done in a lot of different ways, telephonically, electronically, with texts. There's a lot of ways that what you just described can happen, and yes, it does put you on very thin ice for a charge that you have now done legal action without having an agenda. So that's why I say, so it starts with 2. All you have to do is add 1 more person, and now you got a potential violation. So that's why I say You know, it's probably better to try to avoid it, but, you know, technically, no, not illegal.
James.
Question over here.
Yes, Dick.
Say that loud. What's the penalty?
Sorry, what is the penalty if you're found to have violated the rule?
Right. Generally speaking, if you are found liable, or if the public body is found liable for committing a violation of the open meeting law, the first penalty is whatever it was they did is null and void. So it either remains null and void, or they have to go back and ratify it, which is a sort of a complicated process, but it's something that can be done. So there's that. There can also be a monetary, a civil penalty assessed. So it's not a criminal offense, but there could be a civil penalty as well. So here's an example, right? We talked about okay, the previous slide, right? What you're talking about has to be on something that you might foreseeably require final action on, right? Foreseeability, right? This is a common concept in the law. What's foreseeable? Something's foreseeable in legal parlance if it's something that a reasonable person in the same situation could have and perhaps should have anticipated, right? That's what makes it foreseeable. It's kind of like, what's foreseeable? You're driving your car down, you know, whatever, McCartney Road at 110 miles an hour in the middle of the night. Is it reasonably foreseeable you might cause an accident? Of course. You know, this is what they're talking about. If a reasonable person could anticipate this, it's probably foreseeable. So if we have people on the board talking together about something that they should have reasonably foreseen they were going to need to take action on at a future meeting, that's the violation. So here's a little, so a reasonable person, it's an objective legal standard is all it is, right? It's very common in many areas of the law. It's an objective legal standard, right? A reasonable person is somebody that acts with prudence and caution to prevent or guard against an undesirable result. So here's an example. I'm not going to mention any names. This is something that really happened. Joe is on the town council, which has 7 members. He goes into the local restaurant where he finds 3 other council members eating lunch. So Joe's number 4, right? If anything happens. So there was 3 of them having lunch. They were okay up to that point. Then Joe comes into the restaurant. Joe decides to sit down and have lunch. He says, you know, I think we really ought to fire the chief of police, don't you? And they start talking about it. Now, why was it foreseeable? Because at the prior council meeting, they had conducted an executive session, the topic of which was taking disciplinary action against the chief of police. So they had talked about the chief of police legally in an executive session, hadn't reached a decision. Was it foreseeable that maybe they were going to have to take some kind of future legal action against the chief? Of course it was. So Joe did a bad thing, right? He should have sat down and talked about the D-backs or whatever, but instead he opens his mouth and starts talking about whether or not something ought to be done about the chief of police. So, and there's 4 of them there. It's a 7-member board. They had a quorum. So now they're done. So I said, was it foreseeable that the council may have to make a final decision about the chief of police at a future meeting? Who thinks it wasn't under this little set of facts? Was Joe acting reasonably when he failed to anticipate that before initiating the discussion? So the final question is, did an open meeting law violation occur at the restaurant? Yes, of course it did. You know, and there were consequences to follow. So, anyway, so like I said, be cautious of discussions between less than a majority. So this was the point that Mr. Walker brought up a minute ago. Why, I say? Because separate discussions between a majority can lead to a complaint that you got around the law by splintering the quorum. In other words, a discussion took place outside of a public meeting. Just didn't happen all at the same time. See? That's a violation. So it's like Mr. Walker's example. You know, today I spoke to Gilbert. Then Gilbert decided to, you know, pass it along and ask Ruth what she thought. And then maybe Ruth decided to ask David what he thought. But none of this happened at the same time. They weren't physically together. Maybe they even did it using text. It's a violation because you assembled a quorum, in a sense, by using electronic or other means, and discussed something about which you're going to have to take action later. So that's splintering the quorum. You know, it's easy to see why it happens, I think, because especially when you get into a difficult situation and you've been pondering it for a while, and you know you haven't had a lot of interaction with other people on the board, and you're curious about what they might think, et cetera, et cetera. But this is how a violation can occur. Yes, Jay?
On a different board in a different county, not too far away. That was my Star Wars introduction.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
I was approached by the president of the board and said, if you will vote for this, I'll do something for you.
Right. Well, that's a different kind of legal problem. That might not be an open meeting law violation, but it's different. Let's just say
It's something you want to avoid.
that might not be a civil problem, if you know what I mean. That could be a little more serious. Yeah, definitely something you want to avoid. Okay, so now we're going to get into executive sessions because we've only got about a half hour here, so let's try to speed up. So I kind of led into this a little early, but I said the content of an agenda item for an E-session is always a judgment call. This is why, right? The law requires that the agenda item, even for the executive session, contains a general description of the matters to be considered. And so the goal, my goal, and Mary Lou's goal, and we put our heads together in drafting these agendas, is to find a way, like as I said before, to resolve this little tension between confidentiality and openness in government, and try to find a way that we can put just enough information to comply with the law while preserving your exercise of confidentiality by holding an executive session. So there's the explanation, right? It's got to be more than just a recital of the statutes or the statutory provisions, but as they say, it should not contain information that would defeat the purpose of the E-session, compromise someone's legitimate privacy interests, like for example in a personnel matter, right? You are going to be discussing a public officer, or perhaps high-ranking employee, or maybe any employee of the district. You have the right to discuss personnel matters in executive session, as you know, but that's the rationale, not compromising the legitimate privacy interests of a public officer, or in my case, compromising the attorney-client privilege if the reason for the executive session is to get some advice from me. So, that's basically the rationale behind this. So as I use this word tension, right, between public policy favoring disclosure and the legitimate confidentiality concerns underlying the executive session provisions. So, as I use the phrase, meat on the bones, right? The agenda item, even for any session, has to have enough meat on its bones to advise the public of what is to be privately discussed without making the executive session pointless. In other words, you're in the executive session for a reason that's allowed by the law, so that's the whole tension or the conflict between E-sessions and the overarching purpose of the open meeting law. So as I say, many public bodies have been tripped up by things that happen before, during, and after executive sessions. So there's a famous court case on executive sessions they've strictly construed it, right? Because the legislative charge, and it's always been upheld by the courts uniformly, is to promote openness in government, not by expanding things that could be used to obviate the rules. So, you know, as I said, the legislature of Arizona and the courts of Arizona have always been on the same page together, and they construe this law very heavily in favor of the public and against the public body. So that's why, you know, we strive not to get in the crosshairs of the omelet team in the AG's office, because winning in court is not guaranteed by any means. So we'll wrap up by just looking at all the different things that you can use an executive session for. Personnel, and as you can see, a few different things that pertain to personnel, right? Consideration of employment, deciding to hire somebody, assigning somebody to something, appointments, or maybe disciplinary action, a demotion of some employee, salaries, an important public officer resigning, a dismissal of a public officer or an appointee. You know, so all of those things can take place in executive session. The caveat on this one is that, and this is also sometimes a mistake that's made, the person that you're going to be talking about, they can't be in the dark. You got to give them 24-hour notice minimum, because they have the right to request that the discussion take place in public. I've never seen anybody do it yet, but they do have that right. And so you can't deprive them of it by not giving them the 24 hours notice. So that's an important requirement for all personnel executive session matters. Confidential, yes, sir.
That doesn't mean they have the right to attend.
Can you speak up, sir?
Yeah, Dick asked, he says, but that doesn't mean they have the right to attend the executive session. That's correct, but often, let me see here. It's especially hiring, you know, like if somebody very high ranking is going to be hired by the board, sometimes they do bring them into the executive session. But most of the time, like, no, you don't have the right. You can demand that if you want to talk about me and demote me or whatever, but you're going to do it in a public meeting, so the public knows, you know, what you're doing to me, or, you know, whatever it is, you know. But it doesn't mean they have the right to be in the executive session.
I have a question to follow up with that. So if we're going to have an executive session to discuss an employee and we've given them the 24 hours and they demand to have it discussed in open meeting, then we don't have the executive session?
Correct. Right. Yep. Yeah, you would agendize it for a public action item. Yeah. Yes, David.
From a practical standpoint, you need more than 24, because
Yes.
if they make that demand, now your agenda is past the
Correct.
24 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, right. I mean, that's the law, that's the letter of the law, but yes, from a practical standpoint, you give them as much notice as you possibly can under the circumstances, basically. So, you know, in our case, since we usually, we post our agendas on Friday, maybe Thursday even at times, that would be plenty. But, you know, if we're going to have to do something with somebody in an executive session, I would say, you know, the more notice they can have, the better. And if you can tell them early in the week, you know, and it should be in writing as well, you know. So, yeah, that's a good point. Confidential records. So if there's something, you know, if we needed to look at something that we would normally keep confidential from the public, whether it was records pertaining to an employee or, you know, whatever the case might be, then we could use that rule to do it in executive session. So if you recall before, they talked about protecting the legitimate privacy interests of people. And then confidential records could be a part of that as well. You know, if the confidential records happens to apply to a person, there could be other types of confidential records as well, you know. But so if we have confidential records involved, we can have an executive session for the board to sit down and talk about it. You notice what I put in quotes, though? Records exempt by law from public inspections. There's a laundry list of everything in Arizona that's considered confidential, and that's what that is talking about. You know, it's not something that we say is confidential. It's something that the law said is, in other words, a good way to think about it would be if somebody made a public records request, could we deny it on the basis that it's protected, it's made confidential by statute? Yes. This is the same standard. You know, in other words, you go to that laundry list, is this document or this set of documents we're going to look at considered confidential under the law? Yes, then we can do it in an executive session. Otherwise, we got to find a different way. Legal advice. Discussion or consultation for legal advice with the attorney or attorneys of the public body. So, you know, when the board wants to get legal advice, obviously there's an issue of attorney-client confidentiality, which is very basic in the American legal system and others, I'm sure. So when that crops up, then we can go into executive session and I can provide legal advice. But the bottom paragraph is the part that causes the trouble. Once they get the legal advice, it must go back into public session. A discussion about what action should be taken now that we got the legal advice, now you're going too far with the executive session. Right? It's just for me to give legal advice. And this one's kind of a hybrid, this litigation, contract negotiations, and settlement discussions, because what you'll see is this does allow for a certain amount of discussion between the public body and its attorneys. So this is kind of the tricky one of all the executive session justifications, right? So it says, this is basically how the law reads on the books. It says the public body may hold an executive session for purposes of discussion or consultation with the attorneys to consider its position and instruct its attorneys. That's the important part. Instruct the attorney regarding the public body's position regarding contracts that are in negotiation, pending or contemplated litigation, or settlement discussions that we're having to avoid litigation or resolve litigation. So basically, what we're talking about when I say a hybrid, so what I mean by that is you can imagine this discussion, right? I'm going to be in there with the board, probably Jackie, and maybe somebody else. You know, it could be somebody from our, you know, risk pool, whatever. You know, we're all going to be in there, and we're going to be discussing this problem that we have, whether we're being sued by somebody or, you know, maybe we're talking about a very important contract that the college is trying to negotiate and decide whether to enter into it. But I'm the one that's going to then go forth and go to whoever it is out there, the person, the attorney for the person that's suing, the other governmental body that we're trying to enter into the contract with, you know, whatever the case may be. So I have to have a mandate, right? I need my marching orders, and that's what this allows for, is that we can talk about the whole situation. But mind you, it's those things only, right? Contracts, pending or contemplated litigation or settlement discussions to avoid or resolve litigation, just those three. It's not an open invitation to, you know, to talk with your attorney about everything and anything and then tell them what you want to do. It's only when it falls into those categories of business. So, and as I said, this is unique. It gives the public body an opportunity to give its attorneys instructions. So only in these limited situations, the public body can sit in the executive session and discuss and arrive at a consensus. So normally, the public body should not arrive at a consensus in executive session. It's an opportunity to do what's allowed under the open meeting law confidentially, but then the legal action has to take place once you go back out into the public meeting. So you don't get and I've seen many times the two things kind of get mushed together and get kind of blended together, right? It's always very tricky, and it's not a good thing, because remember, a record must be kept of what you do in executive sessions. You know, someone has to be taking the minutes. The easier way is to just record it. You know, you turn on a tape recorder, now you got a verbatim transcript, basically, of everything that happened. But in the event, and those minutes or those transcripts of what we did in executive session are made confidential by law, except from people like the Attorney General. So if they're trying to figure out if we violated the open meeting law in the executive session, we're going to have to give them that. So, but I think the best, you know, the law does require, though, that we at least keep detailed minutes. And like I said, a lot of public bodies will just record them, you know, so that it saves a lot of time and trouble of having to take notes. And yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary, with your question, did you get it?
We have our auditors asked to read our executive session minutes every year.
Yes, I believe they are allowed access to the e-session minutes, yeah. But there aren't many people or entities, let's say, that are, and there's certainly sacrosanct, you know, as it comes to the public and all of that. So, yeah. So, you know, and as I put the last little thing there, so now you've had this executive session, right? And you've instructed your attorney on how to go forward and carry this thing to conclusion. Then what are you going to do in public? A good practice is to just have an agenda item where the motion would be to authorize its attorney or, you know, to proceed as was directed in the executive session, right? So now what does that do? The public has the little agenda item with a little bit of meat on the bone, so they kind of know what we were talking about, but they don't really know very much because it's confidential, and then they know that the attorney was authorized to proceed. They aren't going to know how I'm going to proceed, but they will know that, you know, the board directed its attorney to do something on behalf of the district as he was directed in the executive session. So that, if we do it, if you always do it in that way, I mean, I think there's very, very little likelihood any kind of problems are going to result. Salary negotiations, another topic that's allowed. You know, this doesn't happen with regards to a lot of people in the district. I mean, Jackie would be one, for example, but, you know, so, but that's an allowed, you know, you can sit down in executive session with the public body to discuss its position on negotiating salaries, compensation, and so forth. Or if you are you know, if you're in a municipality or a county that has, you know, any kind of unions, you can talk about those kind of things. And then that's it. International, interstate, and tribal negotiations. You can have executive sessions pertaining to those topics. It doesn't probably crop up a whole lot, but it can, since we are, you know, basically contiguous within a couple of tribal organizations. So. Real property, right? This happens a lot, right? You know, I know we've had them, you know, especially when there's a lot of development, you know, purchase, a sale, and lease of real property. You can discuss these kind of things in executive session. This is another one where the public body is allowed to give its representative, which would probably be the attorney, but not always, regarding the purchase, sale, or lease of real property. So, so as it says, it allows, this provision also allows the public body to instruct its representatives, right? So here again, there's one of these hybrids where the public body has an opportunity to sit with its representative, whether it's the attorney or maybe someone else that's going to be conducting the property acquisition or lease or whatever it is, and they can you know, give instructions and talk about it. So that's about it, folks. Yeah, well, I beat the clock. It's 1:45. So does anybody have any questions?
It's always been in executive session, the attorneys are always sure to tell us nothing can be discussed outside of this executive session because there are violations of that. So.
Yes, the confidentiality of an executive session, first and foremost, it has to be protected by you the public body or anybody that's in there with you. In other words, any materials you bring in that are the subject of the discussions have to be kept confidential. You can't later give those to other people outside of the public body. You have to, of course, anything that you talked about, you can't bring that outside the room. It's all got to be kept confidential within you. Yeah, and that's, again, sometimes, mistakes happen. People, you go home and your wife's like, well, what did you talk about? So you tell her, and then, she doesn't realize it's supposed to be confidential, so she tells somebody, but that person happens to be somebody that shouldn't be hearing it, blah, 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 right? I mean, believe it or not, these things have happened, so.
Gets posted on community chat.
Yeah, Facebook, right? Facebook. So, anything else, folks? I tried to keep it short and sweet. I mean, if you have other issues that pertain to the open meeting law that you want to get into, I mean, I'd be happy to come back, just let me know. Yeah, Jerry?
Do you have a printed version of this overhead projected?
I do, actually. You have it? Okay. Yeah, I do. Yeah, you'd be...
James, if you send it to us, we can also put it on our board's team site,
Okay.
so they can have it for reference later as well.
Yeah, will do. I'll send it to Mary Lou. Actually, I think I did send this to Mary
We'll
Lou.
put it on our board.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, well, this was just a work session, right? We were not doing anything confidential here today. So. And this is just the law, So. All right, well, thanks very much, folks. It was a pleasure.
Yes,
Great
thank
job.
you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very
Okay,
much.
you're welcome.
Yeah, very good. Oh, we have a little break, so please feel free to take a break. Okay. I called a meeting to order of the Pinal County Community College District Governing Board, September 19th, 2023. Welcome all of you who are joining us today. And Mr. Walker, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll move to adopt the minutes as presented.
Or the agenda?
The agenda, I'm sorry.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item on the agenda, call to the public. None. Okay, moving right along. We are at consent agenda. I'll go ahead and read this. All items with an asterisk are consent matters unless they are removed from the consent agenda at this time. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda by any governing board member. Consent agenda items will be approved by one motion, and there will be no specific discussion of these items. Items removed from the consent agenda will be approved as a non-consent agenda item. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So move.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Oh, yes.
Speak slow.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion carries. Item number 6, Dr. Scaldini, the review, approval, or disapproval of a potential amended intergovernmental agreement between Central Arizona College, Pinal County, and the Arizona Commerce Authority. This is another one of those fancy projects we have.
Good afternoon, President Kasuga, members of the board, and President Elliott. Sorry.
Pretend like you're a rock star.
I am. You've got me. In the late fall of 2022, the college was approached by the county about a workforce training center for a company called LG Energy Solutions. LG Energy Solutions was planning to build a manufacturing facility, and the training facility about which we were approached was to serve for the training and onboarding of employees for the manufacturing. In the spring of 2023, LG Energy Solutions agreed to this, and planning and design moved forward. In this agreement, for 5 years, LG Energy Solutions, I'll say LG, will have exclusive rights to the building, and it will also serve as an experiential learning site for our students. And then after 5 years, the building is the property of the college. In the terms of the agreement, a change from other agreements in the past, the funds for operation and maintenance of the facility, which falls to the college, will be paid upfront in the amount of $500,000 rather than progressively over time. At the same time, year by year, as a fixed amount is paid for operations and maintenance by the county, shortfalls and excesses in those payments will be tracked and compensated accordingly to the college at the end of the 5-year period. So we're whole on all of those, and it's good to have the upfront money. The Arizona Commerce Authority is the third-party procurement agent for the facility, which is expediting the process. And then finally, we are nearing the end of design, and construction will begin in a few months. And so that is the nature of the project and the basic terms of how we will be compensated for the parts that we're undertaking, operations and maintenance. It is recommended, as a proposal, it is recommended that the Board of Governors approve the IGA agreement between the college, Pinal County, and the Arizona Commerce Authority, and the President supports this recommendation.
All right, any questions for Dr. Scaldini on this very exciting project in Mr. Walker's backyard this time?
In my backyard.
Yeah, just about.
All I want to do is make sure we get the landscaping taken care
All
of.
right, we'll talk about that another
I
time.
might add, because this is a development that's occurred since probably our last board meeting when we actually looked at the design, McCarthy has been selected as the design build with Architecton, which obviously makes our lives a lot easier since they're the design build for our skilled trades and allied health. So that will really help with this project.
Great.
And the groundbreaking is on the 25th?
26th.
26th.
The morning of the 26th.
Yeah.
I think Dr. Elliott sent that out to us.
Actually, that's for the skilled trades and allied
Oh, that's a
health, not
different
for the Workforce Training Center. I know it's confusing, 3 buildings, 2 different projects.
I have a note here for comparison purposes. This project is similar to Drive 48, which was done in the past. That will be meaningful to you. It was before my time, so
That's okay.
I
You
thought
can
I'd
still go
share
visit
that.
it. Great.
Okay?
All right.
We done?
If there are no other, go ahead.
Move to approve.
Oh, there's a motion to approve the agreement and seconded by Ms. Smith. So any discussion? No. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Scaldini. You got your fingerprints on this one. Okay, moving on. Item 7, report from Dr. Elliott, report from the president.
Good afternoon, board members, President Kasuga, faculty, staff, and guests. I have 3 things that I'd like to share with you today as a district update. I don't know that if the press release has come out yet, but our team that we took to the Alliance for Innovation and Transformation Conference earlier this year, our team actually won the Innovation Award and competed against 50 other teams. And the other interesting thing about this is I'm not doing any of the work, Dustin and Andrew are doing all the work. we're actually in the stages of developing our idea that could actually bring, I don't want to share it out loud because we've asked for NDAs, non-disclosures, but we had a great team, and Suzanne was part of that team, and Jen and Jenny and Dustin, of course, and Andrew. So really look for something big coming from the college, and we're really excited about our team winning out of 50 teams our Innovation Award. So I was really proud of the group. They did an amazing job. As Mr. Walker mentioned, a groundbreaking at SMC is September 26th, and that will be for the new allied, the skilled trades and allied health buildings that we're building at SMC. And then finally, I want to share that we're really close to finalizing the contract for the woman who wants to open a restaurant at Aravaipa. So we will actually have an operating restaurant in hopefully the next few months at the Aravaipa campus. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but I just wanted to share with those three exciting big events.
Great. Any other questions for Dr. Elliott? Congratulations to the team, and wow, keep up the good work. Can't wait to hear about the secret project. Okay, now I'm in suspense. Okay, number 8 on the agenda, Business Affairs Report. Dr. Scaldini, you're back on.
Thank you. It's good to be back, and I have a financial report for you for the month of July and the current fiscal year, which is completely devoid of excitement. There's not much to say. 1 month into the year, the trend lines are invisible, and I can tell you, however, that this budget amount relative to, or the operating fund of the budget relative to the total budget is about 5.3% lower than last year, so it's a more efficient budget than last year, and last year wasn't bad. There are no unusual items affecting the numbers in the finances, so we're building toward more meaningful indications in subsequent months that will be coming toward you. A second part of this part of the presentation is the awarded bids over $20,000. You will typically these are read, but I understand that we're no longer doing that. I will simply ask that if you have questions about the items, you will avoid the one that deals with my contract, and I will leave it at that. Okay.
All right. If there are no questions for Dr. Scaldini, I think we're good to go.
So,
Okay, thank you so
good.
much.
Thank you.
Since you were, 3 days into your job the last time we saw you, this is great. Okay, well, as you said, a very unexciting report. Boring is okay. All right, item number 9, academic affairs. Dr. Gilliland, workforce development, career and workforce training on deck.
So, good afternoon, President Kasuga, members of the board, Dr. Elliott, Mary Lou, staff, students, and guests. I hope that our report will be exciting for everybody today. I am here to introduce Andrew Clegg, who is our executive director of, oh my gosh, I keep forgetting exactly your title, Andrew, but he's essentially our workforce development, partnerships, and economic development for the college. Andrew has taken on all sorts of things and is very important actually to our strategic plan, because one of the projects under academics is to increase our partnerships and to create more opportunities for direct employment and for training that may or may not carry credentials. So Andrew is doing all sorts of things. And just briefly background, Andrew's been with the college for 7 years. He first came on board as the director of our TACT grant, Department of Labor Trade Act Agreement grant that really significantly improved a lot of our skilled trades areas and was actually a very large consortium grant with 5 other colleges. We were the lead. So he directed that, and then he moved over to directing the Center for Community College Success under the President's Group here in Arizona, and then came back to us to take on this role. So, Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, President Kasuga, members of the board, Dr. Elliott, colleagues. It's my pleasure to talk to you a little bit about workforce development today. Once again, my title is Executive Director, Career and Workforce Training, which is a mouthful, so just call me the workforce guy, and that works just fine. So I thought it would be good just to kind of place set what is workforce development. It means a lot of things to a lot of people. There's a lot of definitions out here, but what it really boils down to is the goal of workforce development is to prepare individuals for meaningful and sustainable employment opportunities while also addressing the needs of employers and the broader economy, which you'll hear a little bit more about today. But who is responsible for workforce development? K-12, community colleges, four-year institutions, businesses, chambers of commerce, economic development folks, government, really anybody. Everybody and anybody has a part in workforce development. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about what we're doing here at the college. This presentation is about an hour-long presentation. I'm going to distill it down to about 10 minutes. So you'll be able to see, I'm only going to talk about certain, different pieces on each of the slides, but the slides are there for you so you can refer back. And I'm sure I missed a lot of things because there's only so much that fits on paper. So under the Career and Workforce Training Department, we have Workforce Development, which is really my main role, but also the Small Business Development Center reports in through us, Community and Continuing Education, which is our non-credit professional development programming, Early Childhood Initiatives, which you might not have heard as much about, but I'll talk a little bit more detail about that, Student Employment Resources, and some stuff that we're kicking around in economic development. So busy slide, but really what my main job is to be a liaison with business. So it could be a new employer that's looking to move into Pinal County, so we can help with the economic developers to try to sell Pinal County. It's working with existing employers to identify the training programs that they need, match them up to what we have, or tweak or develop new programs to help them out. It's also grant management, so there's a lot of different grants there's a lot of money out there right now from the federal government. So it's how do we properly and accurately and adequately apply for those to support the programs that we have or future programs as well. Special projects, if Dr. Elliott has something that needs to be done, she'll throw it out to me or Dr. Gilliland will do that as well. So there's a lot of different things that pop up that fall into what I do. But I also represent the college in many different ways through chamber and community events, workforce events, boards and commissions. I am on the Workforce Development Board for the college. I've been on it throughout my career many different times, but then other boards that come up, whether they're in our communities or the county at large. So here's some really exciting things that are going on right now. We are working on a drone program where we're partnering with a company called Unmanned Safety Institute to create a credit program here at the Maricopa campus. USI has been operating out of here doing their commercial training. So we're taking their curriculum, we're going to make it a 4-credit class, not 4-credit, but a 4-credit program here. But it's also going to be a credit-bearing class for their clients as well. We're hoping that it's going to start spring-ish at some point. But there's really two parts to drone program or to drone operation. One is traditional, where you have a remote control, you see the drone, and you watch it fly. The next one is what's called beyond visual line of sight, where you're creating a flight plan through a command center, and the drone goes. And it goes past where you can actually see it. So it's pinging radio frequencies, it's pinging cell towers, and that's how it stays in communication. So we're looking at building a command center here at Maricopa that can be used by our commercial partners to either get some more R&D companies here to do their testing, but it's pretty exciting. We're looking at expanding different programs that we currently offer to the Superior Enterprise Center, which is a program at the town of Superior, and they're working with the Resolution Copper to get ready for the big employment push when they finally get all their permitting and things done. We're looking at doing some more expanded programs in Aravaipa. This is something that ASARCO has approached us, as well as CIVIT. CIVIT is the CAVIT of that part of the county. But they need welding and they need our automated industrial technology program. They'd like to do that as a dual enrollment concurrent program. because the high school students need jobs. So this will help them get jobs a little bit faster. We've already heard about LG. We've been meeting quite a bit with them, we being the Pinal, members of the Pinal Workforce Board, as well as Mesa Community College. Yes, we're partnering with those folks up north, but we do have a good track record of working with Maricopa and Pima to develop programs like AIT, because frankly, we're just not going to be able to help, hire 2,000 people, so we need to have help from the other, our other partners. We've been invited recently to participate in a semiconductor training partnership with the University of Arizona. They've received $37 million to do training around semiconductor manufacturing. I'm sure everybody has heard of all the CHIPS Act and all the new businesses coming to the area. So far, we haven't done agreements yet, but it's looking like we're going to get $1.5 million to do VR training that actually connects our classrooms here with the clean rooms that they'll be doing at University of Arizona. So it's actually really cool technology. And we'll probably also get some equipment as well to do regular semiconductor training. Today you got to experience a little bit of the food truck project that we were working on here at the Maricopa campus. This originally started by addressing a need for, in the state of Arizona, if you have a food truck, you have to have a commissary. And the commissary is a place to prep your food, to store your food, to do a lot of stuff like that. You have to have one. There are none in Pinal County. What Pinal County food trucks are doing, or they're either going up to the commissaries that are up in Maricopa County, or they're going into somebody's commercial kitchen and doing it there. So when we started introducing this to the food truck ecosystem here in Maricopa, they said we don't have a place to park. So we're looking at also putting a food truck park here in Maricopa County, which will allow the community to be able to access food trucks in one central location, but also to serve our students and staff since we don't have food service out here. It's going to bring in revenue to the college. It's going to fulfill that need that we were talking about in the definition of workforce development. It'll allow us to direct people to our Small Business Development Center as a funnel for clients, as well as add more jobs. So really good. And I also mentioned grants. I won't bore you with that, but we're looking at a lot of different things out there that are going to bring more resources into the college. I know I'm talking fast. I only have a little bit of time, and I want to hit everything. I'm okay? Good. Okay. In the state of Arizona, small business development centers are situated at the community colleges. So ours is, our director, Kevin Connors, is based in Maricopa, and then we have another rep, Paul Vuklos, who is based out of our Apache Junction campus. So what they provide is one-on-one advising, business plan development, training, including live informational sessions, online resources, and they do travel. So it's not that they're just stuck at a campus. Kevin goes to Signal Peak, and Paul also covers Santan. So it's a lot of resources that they provide to our small businesses, and they are on a calendar fiscal year, so these are statistics from the beginning of their fiscal year. So clients served so far, 156 with 721 hours of counseling, 8 new businesses, 25 jobs created, capital raised, which in this market right now for small business lending is hard. They've been able to help raise $510,000, and sales have increased by 596, which is not bad since we're still coming out of COVID. So there's a lot of new businesses looking to start in the area. Kevin was not able to be here today. I would introduce you to him. He is meeting with the state SBTC folks for an audit. Not a bad audit, it's just their normal rotation audit. So this is where a lot of the excitement is coming in. And Megan Purvis is back there. She is our new director for our Community and Continuing Education Department. So this is all the non-credit stuff. We do have some credit-bearing programs in here as well, but if you look at what a lot of businesses are asking for are those short-term programs that can provide additional training to either help somebody increase their chances of moving up in a company or to just skill in something different. So it's not a normal 16-week program. It could be a half-day seminar, it could be full day, it could be a week, could be a couple weeks. It really depends, but a lot of it is customized as well. So on professional development programs, we've partnered with our internal teacher education program to offer some of the courses as just standalone cohort courses in the elementary schools. There is a requirement right now that they get a particular reading learning endorsement. They have to get it in a particular particularly short period of time, so we're delivering it as a cohort inside, virtually generally, but it's for individual school districts. So we're working with Casa Grande, Coolidge. We've even been approached and delivered courses outside in Phoenix, because Pinal County money is good, but money that we can get from these other counties is great as well. We have a huge partnership with Ed2Go for online continuing education classes. It's something as simple as MS Office to speed Spanish, grant writing. There's really hundreds of courses that are non-credit out there. They even have an HAC program. I'm really not sure how well that would work because there's no hands-on training, but there's some things out there that will surprise you. We're also doing, we've done a big push for our CPR courses, and we do have a couple of programs that are credit-bearing. The Code Enforcement League of Arizona does code enforcement, and it's a 6-credit class that we offer periodically throughout the year. And a company that we've partnered, or a union that we've partnered with in the past, Southwest Carpenters, is going to be restarting some of their training with us as well. So it's courses that are delivered by their staff using our curriculum that leads to the credential. So, and then, of course, we have our lifelong learning program, ceramics, hot rods, and woodworking. But we're also looking at some other things that might be out there. So coming down the pipeline, the first one on the list is something I'm very excited about. In order to work at a water or wastewater treatment plant, you have to sit for a test through the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. Right now, the trainings that are offered are expensive or outside of Pinal County. But more importantly, to do a test, you have to go to Gateway Community College or the city of Phoenix. And those are the only 2 testing centers in the state. So we have been granted the ability to offer tests at any of our campuses in Pinal County. So that's pretty huge. We're still working on the MOU and all the agreements, but we have the approval from ADEQ. Yes, sir.
What kind of tests are you talking about again? You went over that pretty quick.
Sure. So we have water treatment plants and we have wastewater plants, and there are 4 different levels. So each level does a different volume and cleanliness and whatnot. In order to be an employee there for within the first, so if you get hired, you have a year to get the actual certification in order to remain employed. So I don't know about you, but I like clean water. So the training is really important for us to offer. Now, what's also wonderful, yeah, it's good stuff. So what's also important is because we're the closest to the southern Arizona counties, we'll be able to pull and do a lot of business with water operators from outside of Pinal County as well.
And Andrew, I'll just chime in because I know we have private water companies and we
Yes.
have public water companies. So
And they both need it.
They've all been desperate to have
Yep.
this happen. So
And they
bravo.
all wrote letters of support,
I'm not
which
surprised.
is pretty impressive. But we just have to get through the paperwork now, and it'll still take a little bit of time. But we have testing centers, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to utilize those for this. And at the very bottom, you'll see expanded testing center. There's other trainings that we can do that lead to industry recognized certifications that we can also do at our testing centers. So, but one of the other items that we're looking at right now is law enforcement professional development. It's a company that we're looking at partnering with. We're actually meeting with the Pinal County Law Enforcement Chiefs Association on Thursday to go over this. So first aid, safe sitter, culinary programs. I have dealer school on there as well. Did you know that a lot of casino dealers can make up to about $100,000 a year? Okay, so I like my job, so I'm staying here. But because we are surrounded by so many casinos, we're looking at doing a program that can help that. We've talked to the auction community, and they said, yeah, we need it. So we're looking at doing that. So the sky's the limit. Also, we're going to look, we relaunched our College for Kids YADA program last summer. That's a program we offer at Signal Peak Campus, so the students are able, the 7th and 8th, 9th and 10th graders can come in, play with some of our toys, our welding, our heavy equipment and things like that to start finding out what it is that they want to do when they grow up. So we're looking at ways to expand that to all the rest of the campuses next summer. All right, now here's where it gets really exciting. This legislation has just been signed by the governor. We can now count certain non-credit programs toward our full-time calculation. It's a game changer. because there's a lot of short-term courses that we can offer, provided they follow one of these categories. So it has to be a CTE program that's recognized by the Carl Perkins Act. Okay? A lot of our programs are like that. We're good to go. We also have the eligible training provider list, which is a workforce Arizona at Work program that can help students pay for classes. If it's on the ETPL, then we can get footsie headcount for it. And if we if we have contracted activity with another agency. City of Apache Junction has reached out to us to do Word, Excel, PowerPoint training at their facility using our staff non-credit. Counts as footsie. So pretty soon, as Megan and her team of her and one other person are working on these things, they're going to be making a significant financial impact to the college, which is huge. So really excited to see what's going to happen. All right, I mentioned early childhood initiatives. This is a little bit separate than our early childhood education program. This is a DES grant that we have been awarded over the last 20 years. And so it's not focused at Central Arizona College, but it's a statewide initiative to help bring or to increase the number of child care providers into the state of Arizona. So the grant, I believe this year, it's either 1.7 or 2.5 million to do these activities, so it's not chump change. But it allows us to offer scholarships to students, and it's really a pass-through, so it comes to us and we administer it out to the other community colleges. But students can get scholarships, they can get a technology bundle, and this is all free. And then they can also participate in an apprenticeship program. So a lot of what's going on right now is our team is going out there to different child care facilities and signing them up. And what's important is there's also another DES grant that we don't manage, but it also helps offset some of the training costs as a reimbursable to the training provider, and it's all done through this. But they're also doing a lot of system building, so they're bringing all the providers together to work on best practices and things like that. So this is a really good program. Oh, and there's also a child care reimbursement. There's about, at least at CAC, there's about $280,000 that can reimburse child care expenses to our students as well. So they administer that. All righty, and we have a new position on our team as well. I called it Student Employment Resources, I just threw that in there together. But we have a coordinator that's going to be a point of contact with employers for them to be able to post jobs at our cac.pipelineaz.com website. This is a website that functions somewhat like Indeed. An employer can put their company out there, post their jobs. Our students can fill it out just like a resume, and where they have an interest, they meet, and then the employers can go ahead and reach out to the students. So it's a really good tool that we're slowly rolling out to our employers for them to be able to connect with our students. And it's really important that we have one point of contact, because right now, businesses are just trying to find out whoever they can talk to. Having one person there, and her name is Erica Aguirre, is going to help us out a lot coordinating things with employers. Alrighty, so now we're dabbling in a lot of economic development stuff. So if you haven't noticed, we have a lot of land at all of our campuses. And we have a lot of assets that we don't utilize 100%. So how can we take those assets and use them to bring in revenue to the college, but also to bring a resource to our communities? So, we're already renting out space to the community, whether it's classroom, meeting spaces, or open spaces. But did you know that we have 4 cell towers at our campuses? So you can make a lot of money renting that space out there, okay? And if you've been to some of our campuses, cell service is not the best. So if we can recruit people to utilize our cell towers, we can bring in some additional revenue to the college, and we can have better cell service, which is not always fun, as we noticed yesterday at Signal Peak. But did you also know that we have 2 recording studios at our Signal Peak campus? One is a small recording studio, so if you've seen a show where they're doing an acoustical or an audio book, we have one that size. And then we have a larger studio where you can bring in a band and you can have the singer and all that fun stuff. We're only using it a couple days a week, so wouldn't it be nice if we could use it Fridays or Saturdays or when it's not being used at a reduced price for our residents of Pinal County? Our students can get some experience running the boards. They can get paid because since they're running our boards, it could be a student employment job. But those are the types of assets that we have that we can leverage and utilize, as well as some land and Corporate trainings, it's one thing when we go out there, but imagine opening up our campus to doing some more corporate training on our site, okay, whether it's strategic planning sessions or big office events or things like that, Myers-Briggs and all that. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to, as a fee, go out doing some work to bring some folks in to do, facilitated services here at the campus. So that was a lot of information. You've got it all in your slide deck. If you have any questions, though, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them, because we got a lot of stuff going on.
Gilbert.
Just a comment, Drew, this is awesome. The wastewater treatment, as our president mentioned, is really sought after, and we're going through that right now in Coolidge. Also, the law enforcement, now, is that to get certified, to be able to be, is that certification?
They are all post-certified instructors that are part. Oh, absolutely.
So will this lead to an officer being able to train at CAC like they used to be able to?
We're not doing a post program here at CAC. This is just professional development.
So it's like adding to?
Yeah.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. Cool, and then I think the child care provider, training them is critical for employment. There's a lot of challenges to, single moms can't get child care, and that keeps them from working. So this is really great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, and I forgot to mention Drive 48, since we've talked about it a little bit. The Arizona Commerce Authority has a film crew out there today. The ACA is putting together a 5-minute movie. It's really going to be a movie, special effects and everything, where it takes a student who's trying to figure out what they want to do when they grow up, and it's going to magically transport them to Drive 48. And so they'll see a futuristic Drive 48, and then they go to Embry-Riddle to learn about the aerospace industry, and then they go to a healthcare provider. So we'll be able to take that when it's cut up and be able to post it towards our own social media. And we slid in some CAC swag, so hopefully when they're in the students' classroom, they'll see the pennant, and there's a couple mugs and things in there too. So we made sure that we got CAC covered in here. So
Just maybe what the ACA, who they are.
Oh, sorry.
Quasi-government, but not.
They're a public-private partnership called the Arizona Commerce Authority. They get their predominant funding from the state of Arizona, but there are a lot of businesses that make up their membership as well. So it's very easy for them to do things because they are not government agency. So when we were talking about the LG pass-through, the county is funding it, but the procurement is being done through the ACA because they don't have the same type of procurement requirements that, government agencies have.
They have a lot of authority also to grant certain waivers for taxes.
They do have a lot of incentives.
Accelerated depreciation equipment. And a lot of times what they do is, just so the public knows, they send out a project with a code word. Like Procter & Gamble and Coolidge was called Free Rides Only, like the James Bond movie. Yeah. And so we didn't know what it was until
they get here.
Until the NDAs and everything, and then we could put the word out. But we get a lot of them, and so we all compete. And it's against other states, sometimes other countries, but in Arizona. So it's really good. The ACA does a lot of really good things.
Yeah, they've been a good partner with us for many years.
It's a great partner to have. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Good questions. Andrew, thank you so much. That
You're
was
welcome.
a wonderful presentation of all that's on your plate, and there'll probably be more as we
A little bit more,
move along,
yeah.
but that's okay.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Gilliland, anything else? That was a lot.
No, I just want to say thank you, and thank you to Andrew. He is truly working, I mean, I don't know how, I'm sure he's working all weekend as well as the regular work days. He's getting so much done for us, but this new position, thank you, Dr. Elliott, has been a godsend, and it's just, kind of getting us all very excited, so thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, we love these updates, or give us opportunity to brag about what all is being done here with Central Arizona College throughout the county, so that's exciting. Okay, anything else for somebody laid this out for us. It's the new events calendar, speaking of using our facilities, and using our facilities to entertain our local residents. My goodness, my husband and I already signed up for whatever the package of 6 is, so we get a discount for the shows. So we're excited to do this. So, those of you who don't know, this just came out last week, I think. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? If not, our our next meeting, and some of us should pay attention where our next meeting is, at Signal Peak Campus, October 17th. All right. So with that, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.